Hi, everyone, and welcome to our presentation. We're the OT students that went to the NSC, the Nationality Service Center. I'm Danielle Kempner, and I'm alongside my group mates, Aaliyah, Tony, Nikita, Jill, and April.
Here are our results of the organizational profile. The NSC mission is to welcome and empower immigrants to thrive in our communities and pursue a just future. The vision is that all immigrants achieve a life of safety, stability, sustainable opportunities, and meaningful community connections. The areas that we identified as challenges, but also opportunities for improvement. While the physical NSC site is under construction, all programming had to be virtual, but we navigated this challenge by most of us planning our groups outside at local parks in Center City, Philadelphia. The process for which we identified the needs of our youth group population was speaking with actual NSC youth members, in-depth conversations and educational sessions on the immigrant and refugee population with our NSC contacts, and we received an NSC youth manual guide, which was super helpful in helping us plan our programming.
So the next few activities will be a part of the Living Well Dimensions of Wellness Youth Group Protocol. So we'll present 6 different activities, 3 of which were done and 3 of which were future activities to be done. The overall focus of this group protocol was to give the participants an opportunity to meet other youth members and to engage in more social participation. We also wanted to provide participants with strategies and techniques to incorporate into their daily routine to help them to promote mindfulness and overall positive mental health. We wanted to use these activities to provide education for the life skills that the participants will be able to utilize currently and that they can use in the future, especially because this is a youth population. These groups provide the opportunities to collaborate with others within the community and also promote the use of local community areas for leisure activities, especially because we used outside locations for these groups. Our groups increased the ability of the participants to enhance and maintain the group members' well-being.
So for our group Living Well, our first long-term goal was that in 6 youth group sessions, participants will use strategies discussed in groups independently to independently engage in one new extracurricular activity for the purpose of stress relief. And then our second goal was after 6 youth group sessions, participants will be equipped with 3 tactics in the areas of financial literacy, stress management, and entrepreneurship to participate in work-related occupations in their new community. So my first group was called the Gorgeous Pumpkin Painting. This was the first group that we had, and it served to get to know one another. So the goal was for the participants to be that they would independently identify 3 strategies to decrease anxiety in stressful situations. The participants were instructed to paint the pumpkins to express themselves. This may include like how you feel, what you're passionate about, and or what you love about yourself. So there was a lot of free range with that. The activity of painting the pumpkins just encouraged self-expression by allowing students to freely paint whatever they wanted to represent themselves. Including the participants' music taste in the painting process was something that I didn't plan for, but facilitated a lot of conversation. And then the discussion after was about self-expression. Through the sharing experience, they began to notice similarities that they may have with other group members. The sharing activity facilitated the group members to learn more about one another and acknowledge each other's strengths. We were able to build rapport through this discussion. Okay, so the successes and challenges. The participants really seemed to enjoy the activity, especially because it was incorporated into the holiday of Halloween. There was positive conversation facilitated through the activity, and group members were able to learn more about each other. Self-expression was obviously through art as a learned coping mechanism from the activity itself. But in addition to those coping mechanisms, we also discussed other ways that they might be able to express themselves. The participants were engaged in the activity, although some of them finished early and required verbal prompts to continue painting. The other challenges that we had was facilitating engagement after like painting one object. Like I felt like I needed to get further prompts like of what they could do to finish the activity. All right, and the outcomes, the group members brainstormed and shared at least 3 coping mechanisms to relieve stress and anxiety. Like I mentioned earlier, additional coping mechanisms were mentioned. So that included like singing, listening to music, or exercising. In the future, I would include the participants' music taste, as I mentioned, because in the painting process, this facilitated a lot of conversation. Lastly, I would let the participants take the lead in conversation and be flexible about like where the group leads, because at first I didn't expect there to be so much conversation from like music, but that's where it led me. So my second activity was called Financially Well. I wasn't able to have that this semester, but I ran this exact group in the spring. So the goal was by the end of the session, participants will be able to apply financial tips and budgeting strategies into their everyday lives. This activity included the Magician budgeting game, and it was used to challenge the students to create a budget that will meet a predetermined savings goal. This game also facilitated deep thought processing regarding like managing trade-offs and how they should make decisions regarding money, what to purchase, what to save. The participants were asked to complete this interactive game together. Like I completed it on Zoom, but they made the decisions and told me like what they wanted me to select each like stage of the game. And then this budgeting game gave the students perspective on challenges of budgeting, especially when you're budgeting together, like you would in a family or with a partner. We discussed that there in life, you may face unforeseen situations that arise, and it's great to already have money and savings for those situations. The group then shared how the game activity changed their view on money. Through the sharing experience, they noticed everyone has a different perspective on how money should be used. So engagement for this group was high, and the group members debated about like what budgeting strategies they thought should be used. Group members were able to share finance terms they know and describe them using a common language that made sense to them. I thought this was really nice that they were able to use those layman's terms to discuss certain concepts, since like this hearing it in each other's like own words would almost like add to the learning experience. And then a challenge we face is that describing certain concepts like credit scores was difficult at times without real life examples. So the participants learned new financial tips and budgeting strategies and shared how it could be used in their everyday lives. This activity and group had a great impact on the participants. I was able to send them the link to the game and provide them with other financial games and resources that they could use on their own. During the Zoom, this was over Zoom, so we used the chat feature to reiterate all directions and main points to help someone facing a language barrier. This could make it easier for them to follow along. Another recommendation, again, is to let them take lead in the discussion. Like I was expecting to have to really like talk them through everything, but actually a few participants really took the lead of like how we were going to be deciding what decisions to make. And then the last factor is just to be aware of using universal terminology when teaching information to student refugees.
So my first activity that is in this group protocol that I was able to lead is called Totally Stress Free. And here's a photo of the actual activity in action. So the overall goal was that by the end of this group session, participants would be able to independently identify 3 different items which they could use for relaxation and their overall well-being, and that they could carry in this decorated tote bag. So the activity itself was using fabric markers and spray paints to decorate multi-purpose blank canvas tote bags. So Each participant was provided with a canvas tote bag that was blank and provided with all the materials to decorate it. The overall purpose was for people to identify creative and healthy methods for stress relief. So this creative process of painting can contribute to stress relief, but also think about different ways, kind of unconventional ways, to help them improve their overall wellness and relieve stress through creative projects or exercises or different kind of tactile activities. So again, each participant decorated their own bag, and they were also provided with 2 items to carry in the tote bag, which represented different methods of stress relief. So one of them was a set of exercise dice, which is a wooden set of dice that has different exercises on it, and it can be used to define a home program for workouts. And then another item that was given to them was slime, so this kind of soft clay that they can use to manipulate and is designed for stress relief through tactile manipulation. After the activity was completed, all the participants discussed their process with decorating the bags and identified different items that they could use, not the ones that were provided, that could increase their well-being and decrease stress overall. The successes and challenges of this group. So this group was successful because the participants really engaged in it. One thing that we really loved was we incorporated documentation for social media. So our participants, they're youth members, right? So they really like social media. And we filmed some of the process for TikTok, which is really fun. And it got everyone to engage and participate with one another. So that was a really nice layer that added on to it. I think the biggest challenges were really the logistics, because we led this group outside. And so there was organizing the location and also a little bit of timing conflict. One of our participants came later. And so we were able to make it work, but that was definitely one of the challenges of this group overall. For the outcomes, again, each participant completed a tote bag. So that's kind of a clear outcome of everyone participated and completed the task. And they also shared things that they could use the tote bag for. So this completed the goal, or added to the goal, of identifying different things that could be used in the tote bag and identifying different methods for stress relief that are a little bit more unconventional and a little bit creative. We would recommend, based on the process of this group, to incorporate relevant mediums such as social media, like we incorporated the documentation for TikTok. It helped the engagement, and I think it's really appropriate for this population. And we also recommend that when engaging in artistic activities, different options are given. So the fabric markers were a little bit more challenging to use. So having the fabric sprays was a really nice option to make that more accessible. The second group, which I did not get to lead, would be an idea for a future group, or one that I could have led in this group if there had been more time, is called I Am the Boss of Me. And it's about skills of entrepreneurship. So the goal for this group would be that by the end of the session, participants are able to independently name 3 career choices, which reflect their personal passions and their values. So for the activity itself, there would be a provided set of stickers with different shapes, and construction paper also set in different shapes, maybe like very clear shapes like circles, squares, triangles. And they could use these items to develop a personal logo, either for themselves or for a business that they would like to start. The purpose of this activity overall is to provide the participants with the opportunity to brainstorm options for a potential personal business and just reflect on their own values and what they would want this business to communicate if it were to come into fruition in the future. For this activity, each individual, again, creates their own logo. And so they also would be given markers so that they could add on by writing or drawing themselves as well. An additional layer that we could add onto this group that I do think that would be really cool would be to download the Tiny Scanner app for each participant onto their personal device, if it's accessible to them. And so they could use this Tiny Scanner app to take a photo of all the logo, or of their logo, and convert it into a PDF. They would then have the access to this PDF. They could do whatever they want with it online. And this could also be sent to the group facilitator and turned into stickers that could be provided for all the participants following the group session. So the potential successes and challenges of this group would be, the big success really would be for all participants to learn new creative ways of seeing themselves as entrepreneurs, right? We're working with a population that often sees a lot of limitations in their opportunities for employment. So we really are hoping to kind of inspire this idea of working for yourself and finding new creative ways. The group would be most successful if participants already have sort of an interest in this. And I think the challenges would be the initial creative process of designing a logo and kind of getting that ball rolling. So that would be something that we'd have to really keep in mind when running this group. The ideal outcomes for this group would again be for everyone, all the participants, to see career options that reflect their personal values, and also think of creative different ideas with the support of someone who has some interest in this. They would also hopefully have tangible tips for becoming an entrepreneur in the future. So we'd want them to walk away with tips that really they could use in the future. It's recommended that this group is led by someone with experience as an entrepreneur or experience in business and marketing that could give them concrete tips. And we want to just keep in mind that maybe the technology portion is not accessible to everyone, and we might want to modify or take that out.
So now the next slide represents the following 4 activities, and this is all under our group protocol socialization with a side of relaxation, which had an overall focus of providing the youth group members with an opportunity to have an informal setting to meet and socialize with one another, as well as give them relaxation techniques that can really help with their stress management. And overall, we really hope to see them build connections and a sense of belonging while also using these tools of relaxation. And so the long-term goal was, after these 6 sessions, participants will have gained social skills, but also built confidence in interacting with their peers, that will allow them to initiate conversations independently and seek out opportunities to engage with one another. So the first activity is walk in my shoes, and we're gonna get a little bit into that. So the goal for this activity was, by the end of the session, clients will be able to independently identify 3 activities or objects they feel best represent who they are and what they value most. And in this activity, we took plain white shoes and we became the designers. And the whole point was to use visual images rather than words to describe who we are and what we think represents ourselves. And we moved from sketching to conversing about the sketches and getting feedback to ultimately designing a pair of shoes that had functional use. And each participant was definitely highly engaged, which was great to see. And at the end, designs and their meanings were discussed, and similarities between group members were discovered. And overall, like I said, there was a lot of engagement and excitement, and conversations were able to flow naturally because of that. And so the sketches themselves were a great way to start, because they opened the gate to communication and conversation. And since shoe sizes were given to us prior to the group, it definitely helped make sure they had shoes of their liking and that fit properly, which was definitely helpful in aiding in the successful and functional use. And so in turn, that could be a challenge if you don't know their sizes. And it definitely takes a long time to create a pair of shoes that you are proud of. So not having enough time can be a challenge, but then the ability to also go home and continue those shoes to provide an extra outlet of relaxation can also be a positive. And so the outcome was obviously having this pair of shoes that they could be proud of. And we did hear from one of the group members that she wore her shoes for the following 4 days after group, which was a really great thing. So we definitely wanted to see that eagerness and sense of pride. And so it's highly recommended that you find out the shoe sizes ahead of time, so you make sure that you're getting the most out of the activity. And the time to sketch, as I said, not only opened conversation, but also helped build confidence. And so that could be its own group, one devoted to sketching on paper, one devoted to transferring your sketches to the shoes. But they definitely appreciated having something useful. And the fact that it was that time of, it was winter time, closed-toe shoe would work best. But had it been summer, maybe Crocs or flip-flops or even slides may have been a great option. And they mentioned that they definitely get the most out of the in-person activities, since a lot of us are starved for that socialization aspect due to the pandemic. So to have higher number and higher participation, it's recommended to have these in-person groups. And here are just some photos showing the groups and kind of how far we got and the sketches we made. So the next group we're going to talk about is called Community Ties, and we're going to get into it. So as you can see here, the kind of end result of this group is having lovely warm blankets, and it is winter time. So it's great to have something to call your own that you also made. And so by the end of the session, participants will be able to independently identify 3 connections that they have made that give them a sense of purpose and belonging within their community. So this was a very relaxing activity. We weren't able to do it, but I have done it in the past. And so you tie 2 blankets together by cutting a bunch of strips, and the ties can represent obviously they're physical ties that you're making, but they can be more abstractly taken as the ties formed or hope to be formed within the community. And this should be a very relaxing activity, but also a time for reflection. And each participant can cut their own ties and tie them as necessary while sharing those connections being made in the community, but you could also work with each other to get it done faster. And definitely discussing how these relationships and ties help better our occupational performance and overall happiness can help people definitely recognize things they may not have. So potential for success, clients definitely leave the session with a nice warm blanket, which is great in these times. And then the activity also is very relaxing and can be a future source of relaxation since it's unlikely you get your entire blanket finished. You also get to recognize the progress you've made in connecting with the community. And you can share connections that may benefit others. People may hear things they resonate with or hear things they're interested in, which can garner further conversation. And obviously, not having enough time to complete all of these ties can also be a challenge. And the socialization definitely relies on openness. So making sure that there's an open line of communication is very important. And the blankets themselves would need to be kept from getting dirty. So it's an environmental challenge. It's highly recommended you'd have scissors that can easily cut through the blankets, or it's going to be a little more frustrating and take longer. And it's definitely helpful to have an example to provide the demo to your group members. And the facilitator themselves should share some of their community ties, since that can kind of open the floodgates and build a level of mutual respect. And might even be helpful to play some relaxing music in the background. And using the solid color blankets could get over the challenge of not knowing who your group members are or what designs they would like. But you definitely also want to encourage participants not to rush. This is supposed to be a relaxing activity. So letting them know that it's okay that they might not have enough time, but they can bring this home will be very, very useful. We definitely would expect to see them obviously leave with their nice blanket that they can be proud of. And they're able to more actively recognize the connections that they've made in their community and the strides they've made as well. And overall, we'd really hope to see a sense of relaxation.
So the next activity that we ran with the group was called Building Spirits. And the activity was run at Dilworth Park in front of City Hall. And these pictures were taken while we were doing the activity during group. And you can see on the Jenga blocks that there are prompts written on it, that had to do with creating social participation and conversations throughout the group. So the goal for this group was, by the end of the session, participants will independently identify 3 strategies to practice mindfulness that can be applied at home to enhance their wellness routine. The activity was playing Jenga to promote health management through practicing mindfulness and coping mechanisms. And the group focused on introducing and recognizing ways to be grateful during the day and serve as a buildup when we are questioning ourselves or doubting ourselves. During the activity, there were 4 participants, and each participant went around in a circle to pull a block off of the tower and answer the prompt or question that was written on the Jenga block, which, like I said, encourages reflection and mindfulness. And then the game continued until the tower was knocked over. And the activity promotes participants to practice a shift in their mindset to having a positive outlook and practicing gratitude. There were discussions before the group that sparked the engagement of the participants when I had them answer the prompt, "I felt good when," and this allowed them to think back at times they felt good and what may have caused them to have this good feeling. And during the group, participants took turns pulling the block, answering the questions, and while participants answer their questions, it allowed other people to see their view of thinking and just shift their mindset or have a response that also created conversation. The participants were very engaged during this activity and displayed joy while they were playing the game and answering the prompts. The conversations really enhanced their social relationships as well. But the challenges that were faced were answering questions that required thinking deeply about oneself and self-reflecting. Answering questions about others seemed easier for them than answering questions about themselves. So some upgrades that I was thinking of for this activity was setting a timer to increase the speed of the game, using your non-dominant hand, or including even more self-reflecting or diving deeper into oneself. And downgrades could be asking a little less deep thinking questions, having more fun movement prompts like stand in a tree pose for 30 seconds and like using more or using less blocks. Throughout the activity, the participants understood the importance of practicing mindfulness and having control over their thoughts, having positive thoughts and practicing gratitude, which overall impacts their health management and wellness, which was relayed back to the participants, and they seemed to have a good grasp they had a good grasp of this concept. One participant even stated how this activity helped her value the small accomplishments, and she will definitely be shifting her outlook. And the recommendations for this activity would to be allowing participants skip answering a question or even performing a prompt, and beware that some individuals may not be able to come up with an answer right away and might need some additional time. And lastly, maybe to encourage more engagement between the group members, asking them to answer questions about somebody else. So for example, naming 3 adjectives to describe the person sitting to their right can create more interactions and conversations. The second activity that I would have liked to run, but just due to time restraints, I was unable to, is called New Year, New Lessons. And this was because the new year is coming up, and I think it would have been a great activity. The goal for this activity was by the end of the session, participants will independently identify 2 health management goals for their new year and 2 steps they will incorporate to achieve their goals. The activity, the reason for this activity was to promote health and wellness for the participants and for them to analyze what might be creating a barrier to their wellness. During this activity, the group leader facilitated and the co-facilitator would have been engaged. So there's 2 parts of this activity, and it would be, the first part would be drawing an illustration or writing down words of what their current lifestyle looks like and what is a part of their daily routines. And the questions that can be asked to perform this illustration would be what they do in a day, or what they did today, what they did yesterday, what is something that they cannot live without, and what do they do if they're feeling down. And after that, they can have the second part of the activity, which would be giving them a separate canvas for them to draw a second illustration or add additional words of what they would like to achieve in the new year. And they would be encouraged to keep, add, or remove from their first illustration. So questions that can promote this would be, what is currently a part of your life that you would like to keep doing or would like to remove and change for the new year? And the purpose for that activity was to have the participants just reflect on their daily routine and think about things that would promote or hinder their health and wellness. But so, as I said, this group was not ran. But the potential successes that I would have hoped for was for them to develop an understanding of what activities can hinder or promote their physical, emotional, and spiritual wellness, for them to gain relationships by learning what their peers are interested in and what others' routines look like, and that can spark new relationships and just maybe give them ideas of new things that they can also try. And then some challenges that can arise from this activity would be, if someone does not want to draw or someone does not want to share, that can definitely alter their experience with this activity. And the potential outcomes I was hoping for this activity was for them to learn about their unwanted feelings and create better ways to deal with them, and also to engage in activities that promote their health and wellness to incorporate at home as well as within the community. And recommendations that I have is just for the group leader and the co-facilitator to provide examples by having a part 1 and part 2 illustrated already to show them what is expected from the group members. And if the individuals are unwilling to draw or would prefer not to draw, then having an open conversation and allowing to answer the questions that would have helped prompt the illustrations, just answering them verbally and having an open discussion to still have that reflection piece of the activity.
The group protocol for the 8th grade group at the NSC was called High School, Here We Come. Our overall focus was to help middle school age students feel more prepared as they transition from 8th grade to high school. Our individual groups focused on identifying strengths and supports, positive affirmations, filling out high school applications, and learning study strategies. Our overall expected outcome for the participants was to build confidence and self-efficacy to prepare for their transition to high school.
We had 2 long-term goals for the 8th grade group. The first was by the end of 4 weeks, 8th grade students will independently identify at least 2 to 3 perceived strengths in order to write their high school application essays. And our second long-term goal was by the end of 4 weeks, 8th grade students will be able to submit at least 1 application to a high school of their choice with assistance from a guidance counselor as needed. So the first activity for the 8th graders was an activity that I designed called Find Your Flow, moving from middle school to high school, excuse me. And this wording was specifically used because I utilized the Kawa River model, where we all know that the flow of life is compared to the flow of a river. So the specific goal for this group was by the end of the session, the 8th grade students will be able to identify 1 personal strength, 1 barrier, and 1 support through the use of the Kawa River model. And the activity consisted of me taking the 8th grade students through the different components of the Kawa River model. It was a group that was held on Zoom, so I would bring up pictures like the ones that you see on the right and engage students in conversation. They were able to comment on the picture directly using the annotate feature, put answers in the chat box, or unmute and share. And the purpose was really to teach them how to utilize their resources and emphasize their strengths in order to overcome barriers they may be facing, specifically with high school applications for this activity, but as well as in life in general. And we also focused on strategies that they can use to cope with stress that comes along with handling barriers and life change, because a lot of the things that they were talking about going through in this transitional phase of their life were stress inducing. And discussion took place via Zoom throughout the activity and throughout sharing for each step, but it also occurred towards the end when students were invited to talk about how they could apply it to their life as a whole. As far as successes, challenges, and recommendations, there was some participation, which was a win for this activity, since we were working with 8th graders and we were working on a Zoom format. That definitely was a barrier. So we did get more participation through the chat box feature than we did have people unmuting to share, which was fine. And we also used an anonymous Google link that was shared through the chat box so that students could type into that document without their name being attached to their answer. And someone did opt to utilize that to share something that was a little bit more vulnerable. So that was definitely a win. As far as other challenges, besides just the Zoom platform, students may not have had a quiet space at home, separate and away from their family to participate in the virtual meetings. So that's just a barrier of the virtual environment overall. And as far as recommendations, I would suggest in the future kind of changing up how the students respond to each step of the Kawa River, just to make it a little bit more fun and interactive, and maybe even incorporate some movement into the activity. I did use a Qualtrics survey as my measurement tool to assess outcomes for this activity. It was administered via the Zoom chat, and students were verbally instructed to take some time to complete it both before and after the activity. There were a few prompts that are displayed on the screen, and the response choices ranged from disagree to somewhat agree, neither agree nor disagree, somewhat agree, and agree. So some of the results, as you can see here, for just 3 of the survey questions. On the left, it's the pre-survey, and on the right, it's the post-survey. I will say it was a little bit different, or it was a little bit difficult to gauge whether there were significant changes made, because unfortunately not everyone who filled out the pre-survey filled out the post-survey, but it does seem like students were able to take at least something away from the activity. And you can see that in the second question, students changed their answers from about understanding their personal strengths from somewhat disagree to somewhat agree and agree. So overall, it seemed to be a pretty successful activity.
So this is the second group that was ran for the 8th graders. It was called Shaping My High School Path. The specific goal was for, by the end of the group session, the participants will create an action plan to apply to high school. The activity consisted of creating a visual guide like the one on the right, organizing elements that are usually included on an application and help guide their applications, like when are they due, why am I applying here, how to apply, who can help, what is needed, and where the schools are located. The group members participated in the activity by contributing answers step by step together. There was a nice end of group discussion revolving around how important it is to ask for help when needed, like from family members or guidance counselors, and how creating a visual guide can be useful in accomplishing goals beyond applying to high school, like applying to college one day or organizing big school assignments. The successes were when the group members spoke up and contributed to the creation of the visual guide at least once. They were moderately engaged, either by unmuting or putting answers to the questions in the chat box. There was some hesitancy, which could have potentially related to the virtual platform, such as turning the webcam on, unmuting, and just overall contributing as much as we would have hoped. We did complete the virtual guide together step by step, instead of giving the participants their own time to complete the guides on their own time and then sharing them. I held up, as you can see, I have a clipboard right there, and I held it up to the webcam, and we did it all together. So the outcomes were a series of 3 statements on a survey that required participants to rate themselves on a scale. All results and responses were known to be anonymous, and it was stated before, and it was administered to group members before the group started, and then also after the activity was finished. 5 participants filled out the pre-survey, but only 4 participants filled out the post-survey, which could have possibly skewed the results. The first statement was, I feel completely prepared to apply to high school. There was an improvement seen between the 2 surveys, and all participants slightly agreed or fully agreed that they felt prepared on the post-survey. The second statement was, I know what my next steps are for applying to high school. There was an improvement here as well, because all students but 1 group member said they fully agreed with this statement. The last statement was, I feel good about my planning and organizational skills. There was an improvement here too, because again, one group member disagreed, but the rest, 3 students, fully agreed with this statement as well. So here are some recommendations. It could have been helpful to bring in a current NSC high school student to share advice and answer questions, because they know what the 8th grade students are going through, and just help them be more prepared to enter high school. Some other ideas on an 8th grade prep series would just be to increase in-person social participation and life skills development, like meal preparation or problem-based skills. To increase participation, just overall be accepting of where clients are in the journey of learning how to speak up more among their peers. Always be respectful that it may take some time to build that trust or rapport that may be necessary for individuals, especially adolescents and teenagers, to feel comfortable speaking up. Create a safe, open environment, even on a virtual platform like Zoom. And finally, just establish some ground rules and expectations in the beginning of the session. Like, I expect every person to answer at least 1 element of the guide and to contribute when necessary.
So the third activity under this group protocol was the second activity that I was able to design. And it is a hypothetical activity because due to time constraints, we weren't able to run it, but it was called Creating Positive Self-Reflections. So for creating positive self-reflections, the specific goal was that by the end of the session, participants will be able to independently identify 3 positive self-affirmations to boost emotional well-being and self-confidence. So the activity itself, if you see the image towards the right at the very top, each student would receive a locker mirror that is magnetic and can be hung in their lockers. And I thought of this because since they are transitioning into high school soon, they will likely all have lockers where they can keep this. And essentially they would be decorating these lockers with either permanent markers or dry erase markers if they wanted to change the message that they wrote on the actual mirror surface, and then different inspirational stickers or stickers related to their interests. So you can see I have more like inspirational, good vibes type of stickers included, as well as things including sports, so it can match different people's interests. And the purpose was to have a mirror to hang in their high school lockers that will boost their mood and self-confidence when they see it because of the positive words, goals, and decorations that they choose. And the discussion would occur throughout the activities as the students are decorating, as well as after the activity when students are invited to share what they put on their mirror, as well as how they connect with them. And the warm-up of this activity is really based on positive self-affirmations. So that would flow nicely into the decorations of the mirrors if students wanted to include their self-affirmations on their mirror. So the anticipated successes, challenges, and recommendations. Since this would be the third group of this group protocol, we would hope that the students would be a little bit more acquainted with each other and more willing to participate and have open discussions. And since I planned this hypothetical group to be done in person, I would predict there would be more participation and connections formed overall because we would be stripping away that Zoom environmental barrier. As far as challenges, some students may not be interested in quote unquote crafting type activities, so it may be harder to engage them. But as OTs, we always kind of have to have a backup plan and things in our back pockets to adapt when things don't necessarily go as planned. And then as far as recommendations, I would recommend playing music that the students like when they're decorating their mirrors so that it's not quiet if they don't decide to participate in conversation, as well as try to start the conversation and facilitate it by introducing things that they might be interested in. Like I know a lot of the students in our groups were interested in TikTok and music, things like that. As far as outcomes, I would still use a survey as the measurement tool. I would do a pre and post survey that would be geared towards positive self-affirmations and self-confidence. And I would likely just administer this using like half sheets of paper in person, since this group would be run in person. And similarly to the last survey, it would have a few statements where individuals could respond either from disagree all the way to agree.
So welcome to the final hypothetical group in our 8th grade sessions called Tackling Tests. The specific goal: by the end of the session, participants will independently be able to identify 2 different strategies to assist with studying, taking exams, or writing papers to include in their daily routines. The activity consists of playing a game of study skills Jeopardy, like you can see in the images to the right, in which group members will share current study habits, brainstorm new strategies for both multiple choice exams and writing papers. They'll be on 2 even teams. And this was to assist the participants with learning new study habits and overall improving their test-taking abilities and writing skills as they prepare to enter high school, because the coursework in high school could be more academically rigorous. An end of group discussion could emerge at the end, just talking about which strategies they really feel like they can embed in their routine and how they would embed that within their routine. Similar to April, I would use the same outcomes of administering a pre and post survey relating to academic skills and how prepared they feel to enter high school based on where their current academic skills lied and then what they learned through the Jeopardy game. For anticipated engagement, we feel like this may be higher because this would be the last group in the 8th grade series, and then they could have time to build that trust and rapport to share and participate. And a recommendation to combat a challenge that can happen with low participation is just to ensure that the group atmosphere is fun and low stress, because the participants will be playing a fun game, even though it does relate to school. Some other ideas to help students prepare for entering high school can be centered on building social skills and how to advocate for themselves and their needs, especially within a classroom and home setting. To elicit more participation, rewards can be motivating, like prizes maybe just for the winners of the Jeopardy game. Establishing ground rules and expectations at the beginning of the group session, like each member of the team has to answer at least 3 questions, could be helpful. And then ensure client-centeredness and relevancy by making sure that the academic skills mentioned in the Jeopardy game are at an 8th grade level.
So the program outcomes from all of us running our groups was for participants to gain tangible skills for increased social participation and community integration. Participants learned healthy tactics for stress relief through creative projects and use of artistic expression. One regular participant has expressed continued interest in groups and has been considered as a facilitator for future groups, and the successful rapport building through group leaders and participants. For 8th grade groups, the participants increased their knowledge about how to prepare for high school and learned about positive self-affirmations and how to use them to improve self-confidence and self-efficacy. The reflections we have gathered through this experience was how to be flexible and adaptable even when logistics are not ideal, such as having a physical setting for groups, challenges with participation, and leading groups emphasize the need to be client-centered and the importance of listening to specific client needs, prioritizing these needs to experience over their preset plans. So if we have goals we wanted to achieve, that we should be adaptable. Also, these groups demonstrated the importance of social participation as a powerful tool for well-being, regardless of the activity or setting. With small groups, the value of collaboration within our team and support of team members was definitely emphasized. And for the 8th grade groups, Jill and April were able to become more comfortable leading virtual groups and learn to be comfortable in silence and allow thoughtful processing time before students were able to answer.
So our OT specific, or our site specific OT slogan, excuse me, is OT and NSC, empowering individuals to be who they want to be and participate in daily life successfully. And we kind of came up with this by combining some OT values and NSC values, as we touched on at the very beginning of the presentation. NSC's mission statement involves empowering individuals who are immigrants to be able to have access to the things that they need. And then empowering is definitely a trigger, excuse me, not a trigger word, a staple word in OT. So we really wanted to emphasize empowering individuals through the collaboration of NSC and OT.